Hi everyone, welcome to week 7. This week we're going to start our chapter 8. Chapter 8 is about economic growth. If you are an econ major, of course, you will learn more about growth and economic development in your kind of more advanced econ courses, especially in international trade and more advanced macroeconomics. So take a look at the videos, take a look at the lecture notes, but I just wanted to point out some of the important things that you need to remember from this chapter. We have some formulas, but again, as usual, you can have the formulas for the final when you are basically calculating any related basically question to economic growth or any other topic. Just make sure you know how to use the formulas. But we also have some important definitions in this chapter. For instance, we define economic growth, we define growth rate per capita. We will talk a little bit about the difference between economic growth and economic development. We will talk about the determinants of economic growth. Important topic we have is labor productivity. So these are the important definitions and concepts that you need to know. We have a couple formulas. One of them is economic growth rate, where basically you'll see how we are able to calculate economic growth, okay, which is the rate of change in the real GDP. So economic growth, in short, is this increase in real GDP. If we want to be more precise, it's the real GDP per person or the real GDP per capita. So we can either calculate the economic growth rate, or we can look into the growth rate of real GDP per capita. So if you look at the notes, I put even examples for you. I also have some videos on how we can calculate both the economic growth and the growth rate of real GDP per capita. So for the test or for the homework, read the question carefully and then basically see which formula you should use, okay? Remember, for the growth rate of real GDP per person or per capita, we have two formulas, so make sure you know both of them. Another important topic we have is called the rule of 70. Again, you can take a look at the stuff that I posted for week 7. I try to explain more about the rule of 70. So basically, this rule of 70 tells the economists how many years it will take for any economic basically variable. But since we're focused on growth here, let's say the economic growth rate or the growth rate of real GDP per capita will be doubled, okay? So if, let's say, the current economic growth rate is 2%, this rule of 70 will tell us how many years it will take for us to double this number and reach the 4% economic growth rate. It's kind of an estimate. So the rule of 70 is important because it tells economists and especially politicians that how much they should invest in the economy if they want to increase, let's say, economic growth rate over time. Okay, so it's a kind of easy tool and the formula is easy. So you just divide number 70, that's why it's called a rule of 70. Number 70 by the current, let's say, growth rate, let's say for 2021. Okay, so if you have the growth rate for this year, you can use it. Okay, so it's a handy kind of tool for politicians and economists to plan for the future, okay? As I said, we'll talk a little bit about economic development, and you will see, if you look at the notes, that they are not exactly the same. Honestly, I'm not going to ask much about the patterns of growth. I'm also looking at the notes while I'm talking to you. I'm not really going to ask specific question from that part. And also, you can skip the different You can also skip the uneven distribution of growth, read it, but I'm not going to ask any question on the test. You might get question on the homework, but I'm not going to ask anything on the final exam, because we have more important stuff in terms of calculating growth and stuff that I will ask about them on the final exam. So I don't want you guys to memorize anything in terms of the uneven distribution of growth or whatnot. Read the catching up process. It's important. There are so many actually good academic papers on these catching up. I also have one of the questions on the discussions you will see. It is about kind of like a catching up process. You will see later, which is kind of related to this topic. It basically tells you that we have some countries that are advanced and rich today, because, and they are ahead of others because they were able to complete the process of modern economic growth, which part of it is capital accumulation, faster than other countries. So now they are not going to end up with a very high GDP growth rate. So their GDP growth rate is between 2 to 3%, and it is the same also for United States and for many advanced economies nowadays. So the number is not really that high, but if you look at their economic growth rate for most of the advanced economies, you will see that we have a sustainable economic growth rate, okay? So the economic growth rate changes between 2 to 3. It doesn't go below 2% unless we are experiencing a super deep recession. Otherwise, it should actually stay within these two numbers, and that would really matters to any country to have a sustainable growth. You do not want to have a super fast growth one year and then a deep kind of decline in economic growth rate. That's bad for a country. You want to have a sustainable economic growth rate, and the key actually for most of these leader countries or these advanced economies is they are able actually to keep this sustainable growth rate by basically investing a lot in technology, by inventing new things. Okay, that's how they can stay ahead of other countries. Okay, so we have other countries that probably didn't start this process of modern economic growth, this industrialization, capital accumulation, as fast as the leader countries or advanced countries, advanced economies. So their economic growth rate right now is lower than these advanced countries, but it does not mean that they cannot catch up with these leaders. Okay, they can if they finish this modern economic growth process and finish up this industrialization. They accumulate enough capital, then they can basically borrow or adopt the technology from other countries. That's in theory, but remember, in reality, if you do not have the foundations of economic growth, if you, for instance, do not have many educated people who are able to use this technology that we are borrowing from advanced countries, even having the latest technology is not going to contribute anything to economic growth. So theories are something, how you implement them in reality is something else, okay? But my point is, it is possible for poor countries, for these follower countries to catch up with advanced countries. But first, they should focus on building some foundation. For instance, they should focus on investing a lot in education, in their labor force. They should actually emphasize on having a good institution. The problem we have with many of these poor countries or these follower countries is a huge corruption in the government. So even if they have the resources, they are not willing to invest that money in the economy for the people, if it makes sense what I'm saying. So they need to have the foundation first, then we can say, okay, now let's go ahead and adopt the technology from the advanced countries, implement it, and then you are able to increase your growth rate. It is possible, but they need to have those foundations, okay? So I like you guys to pay attention to this part. It is a very interesting, actually, a topic. If you are interested, you can even learn more about it if you search on the internet, okay? So the structure, having that foundation is very, very important for poor countries. Then we have the determinants of growth. The focus here that I want you to pay attention is on labor productivity, and basically the formula we have for labor productivity. If you took microeconomics, we also had this labor productivity in micro. So labor productivity in general is the amount of output that is produced per unit of input, okay? Since we're talking about labor specifically here, so that input will be our labor, okay? So the formula we have for labor productivity is real GDP divided by the hours of work. But remember, we had real GDP in previous chapter. We're also going to have another formula. So if you're taking notes, if you are keeping the formulas kind of ready for final exam, you can also add this formula for real GDP, okay? So if you don't remember anything about real GDP, definitely take a look at the formulas we had for chapter 7, okay? That's pretty much it for this chapter. So forget about the numbers or the little history that I put for the notes here. I'm not going to ask anything like that on the test. So I tried actually to keep this chapter short, just pinpoint the important parts of this chapter. So try to study the notes while you're looking at the textbook, okay? So let me know if you have any question. So as you can see, this chapter is kind of related to previous chapter, chapter 7. In chapter 7, we define GDP and some other things like real GDP, nominal GDP. Take a look at, of course, the video and the notes. So these two chapters are kind of related. Let me know if you still have problem understanding GDP or real GDP, okay? I'm here for you, so just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to explain more. So hope you find this video helpful. But these are my weekly videos, just to let you know. That's why I'm not putting a lot of information in them. But you'll learn more if you watch my lecture notes videos. They are a little bit longer, but I hope that you find them helpful, okay? Till next time, take care.